Bryan Hayes is back. It's Harvey's Hot Takes. Bryan, the Predators lost on Wednesday night, and I wanted to play you a clip from Nashville Predators general manager Barry Trotz on Nashville radio on Tuesday.
If we don't get it going, then I'm going to start our rebuild plan a little bit. You know, what we did in the summer was, as I say, fantasy hockey until we become a good team. If we do not become a good team, then you know, we're going to see a lot more of our kids starting their process.
Okay. Interesting because, Bryan, I remember last July the 1st, we talked about the fact that Barry Trotz won free agency when he signed Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault. He also re-signed his all-world goaltender, UC Saros. This seemed very much like a man who is building a contender. What do you think when you hear him throw around the word rebuild?
I think that's fantasy, quite frankly. You talk about playing fantasy, and that's what Barry said that he was basically doing in the summer. The idea of being able to rebuild when you've locked in all these guys in a salary cap world is a fantasy. And I actually love the idea of this possibly happening. I'm rooting for this because it's so chaotic. It would go against the grain of every GM in the NHL. And it was fantasy in the summer, and that's why, you know, I'm a big fan of Barry Trotz. He's a very honest guy. I've interviewed him a lot. Really likable guy. Really great coach. But I don't know if he's a great GM. I mean, last year they got red hot down the stretch and went on somewhat of a historic run to get in. They lose in the first round. This year we see what's happening. But Barry Trotz, it did effectively feel like he was playing a video game on July 1st. Steven Stamkos is available, I'll take him. Jonathan Marchessault's available, I'll take him. Brady Shea's available, I'm in. And now we're, 6 weeks into the season, and he wants to restart the game. He wants to reset everything and pull someone's controller out and rebuild. And it's just not possible. It can't happen. You're locked in. Stamkos is here. Marchessault's here. Ryan O'Reilly's here. Roman Jossi's here. You mentioned Saros. They locked him up long term. It's just not possible. And I think the guy that really hates to hear this would be Andrew Brunette, because in the salary cap era where you just have no flexibility and no one's going to help you out in early November get out of this bind, generally what ends up happening is the coach goes. And I'm sure Brunette's listening to that thinking, I'm in big trouble here, or I could be. And I wouldn't be shocked if the owner at some point went to Barry Trotz and said, you know what, I still think you're a better coach than GM. We tried the Brad Stevens thing, right? It worked in Boston. Brad Stevens, really good coach. Great GM. Look what he's done with the Celtics. Maybe that's not going to apply here with Barry Trotz. And maybe the owner is going to say, Barry, you got to get behind the bench and you got to make it out as if it's reality, not fantasy. You got to make this work, because they spent a lot of money. They committed to a lot of guys over the age of 30. It's an ugly start. I'm a big Barry Trotz fan. I love the honesty, but that's a fantasy. The idea that they're going to start rebuilding, it simply can't happen. They got to find a way to figure this out.
Bryan, the Winnipeg Jets are getting all the love in Canada right now, and they absolutely deserve it. They win 12 of their first 13 games to start the season. What a start for Winnipeg. But what about these Vancouver Canucks, Bryan? They have a 3-game losing streak to start the season, and then they go on a streak where they've won 6 of their last 8. And you feel like this Canucks team is flying under the radar at this point.
Yes, I do. I think they're a sleeping giant out west. I absolutely do, considering how well they played last year, how great of a story they were last year, how competitive they were in the playoffs last year with all of those injuries. And when you consider, Jay, they're off to this start, and Thatcher Demko has not played a game yet, and it feels like Elias Pettersson has not played a game yet. I know he's dressing and he's playing, but he's doing nothing. So you could argue their most important piece in Demko, who's an all-world goalie. When he's healthy and on his game, I think he's one of the 5 or 6 best goalies in the league. And arguably their most talented player in Elias Pettersson are simply bringing nothing to the table, and they're off to a red-hot start. And they're chasing that top seed in the Pacific. And as you mentioned, the Jets are getting a lot of love. They deserve to. They're 12-1. They've been outstanding. They're scoring 1 million goals. They're giving up nothing. They look great. Obviously, there's a buzz around Edmonton. with the way that they started, and then McDavid gets injured, and now he's returning quicker than we thought. And it's always going to be loud in Toronto with a new coach and a goalie injury, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do here. So that's where a lot of the conversation and a lot of the oxygen has gone in this country. Winnipeg, Edmonton, Toronto. And again, I think Vancouver's sitting out there saying, do not forget about us, because we are steady, we are rolling, we're a really good team. And if Elias Pettersson can finally snap out of it, and it is one of the most curious cases I can recall seeing in my lifetime as a sports fan, how this guy got paid what he got paid, how he's done what he's done in the past, and how he looks like he's completely forgotten how to play. Once he remembers how to play, he'll be a rock star again. Once Thatcher Demko gets back in the crease, I believe he'll be a rock star again, and I think that sleeping giant is going to come alive, and it's going to be awake. And I think a lot of people are going to be buzzing about what the Canucks can do and likely will do the rest of the season.
A lot of people buzzing about Anthony Stolarz. He got the shutout Tuesday night for the Leafs over the Boston Bruins. He has a .928 save percentage. Here's the caveat, Brian. He's already at 9 starts. His career high is 24 starts. So he's a third of the way to his career high in starts. Does that make you a little bit nervous?
Yeah, it does. Those numbers are somewhat staggering for, again, a guy who's in his 30s now. Like, this isn't some young kid trying to make his way, like Joseph Woll, right? Like his tandem goaltender here in Toronto, where Woll's a young guy, just broke into the league on a full-time basis last year. Stolarz has been kicking around pro hockey for quite some time, and yet he just has no track record of a guy that can play 30 games, let alone 40 or 50. And that's where he's tracking right now in Toronto, and he's doing so at an exceptional pace. He has been the best Maple Leaf this season. Bar none, he's been the best player, the most consistent player on this Leaf team, and he's been a huge factor for Craig Berube, who's trying to get this team to play differently, who's trying to get the uber talent like Matthews, like Nylander, like Marner, like Tavares, like Riley, to buy into a different style and a different system. And it's not working all the time. It hasn't been easy. They haven't been scoring at much of a clip. Their power play has been horrendous prior to that Bruins game the other night. And yet what's saving them and what's keeping their head above water is Anthony Stolarz. It's been an incredible signing. 2-year deal at a low number. He's been a beast, but it's going to be a talking point all year. When does he run out of gas? Will he run out of gas? Can he start 30, 40, 50 games? And I don't know if Joseph Woll can start 30, 40, 50 games. So, again, the Leafs are off to a decent start. They got a lot of talent. I have no question they're going to be a playoff team in the end. But who is going to be their goalie? And in terms of first impressions in the city of Toronto, people are, like you said, buzzing about Stolarz. He's a big dude. He's absolutely dialed in right now. And if he can prove that he can play the amount of games necessary to be labeled the number one and match it with the statistics we've seen early on, the Leafs have themselves a great setup moving forward.
People are buzzing about Bryan Hayes, and I'm going to tell you why. Harvey's incredible burger franchise, been serving Canadians burgers for 65 years. This guy's been delivering the hot takes since 1983.
Hot Takes is presented by Harvey's. Customize your burger and get it delivered from our app to your door. Harvey's, it's a beautiful thing.